The Buckingham Palace guards are famous for their discipline, their unshakable presence, their absolute refusal to break composure unless provoked. One overconfident tourist, Jake, thought he had found a loophole. "If I steal his hat, he'll have to react." It was supposed to be a harmless prank, but Jake was about to learn the hard way that the Royal Guard does not play games. And when the dust settled, the internet would never let him forget. London's Buckingham Palace stood as grand as ever, its gates lined with tourists snapping photos, waving Union Jacks, and eagerly waiting for the famous changing of the guard. Among the crowd was Jake, a 24-year-old American tourist with too much confidence and too little common sense. He and his two best friends, Tyler and Nick, had spent the morning doing what every first-time visitor to London did, eating overpriced fish and chips, taking selfies in red phone booths, and laughing at how serious the Royal Guards looked. But now Jake had an idea, a very bad idea. Jake squinted at one of the towering, stoic Royal Guards, standing like an unmoving statue by the gate. "Dude," he said, turning to Tyler, "I bet you $5 I can grab his hat." Tyler nearly choked on his soda. "What?" Nick, ever the enabler, grinned. "Oh my God, you totally should. That thing's got to weigh like 10 pounds. No way he'd even notice." Jake puffed out his chest. "Come on, it's not like they can do anything. They're just standing there, man. It's all for show." A nearby British tourist, overhearing this, muttered, "Bloody Americans." But Jake was too busy hyping himself up to hear it. A few other tourists started noticing the conversation. One woman, holding a DSLR camera, shook her head. "He's about to learn the hard way." A teenage boy pulled out his phone. "Dude, if he actually does it, I'm filming." Jake, now feeling like the star of his own movie, stretched his arms, cracked his knuckles, and took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this." Tyler and Nick held back laughter, phones already recording. Jake walked up, acting casual, blending in with the other tourists. Step by step, he inched closer. The guard stood motionless, rifle at his side, eyes locked straight ahead. Jake reached out his hand, fingers just inches from the legendary bearskin hat. And that's when everything changed. Thump! A boot slammed into position. The rifle tilted ever so slightly. The guard moved. Not much, just enough. Just enough to make it very, very clear that Jake had crossed a line. Then, before anyone could react, a voice exploded through the air like a thunderclap. "Stand back!" The crowd gasped. A woman actually screamed. And Jake? Jake's soul nearly left his body, because he had just awakened something he wasn't ready for. And now he was about to regret everything. Jake's fingers had barely brushed the surface of the Royal Guard's iconic bearskin hat when the world around him changed in an instant. What had once been a casual drunken prank had now turned into a very real problem. Because in that split second, for the first time all day, the Royal Guard moved. Thump! The sound of a military-grade boot slamming into the pavement reverberated through the air. It wasn't just a step. It was a warning, a declaration that Jake had just made the single worst decision of his life. The crowd, which had previously been buzzing with light-hearted amusement, had gone completely silent. Phones shook as people scrambled to capture the moment. A mother instinctively pulled her child closer, sensing that things were about to go very, very wrong. And then, the rifle moved. Not much, just enough to make it clear that it could be used if necessary. And that was when the voice came. "Stand back!" The words weren't just spoken. They were roared. A sound so loud, so powerful, that it felt like it had been forged in the heart of a battlefield rather than a ceremonial post. Jake had never heard anything like it. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a request. It was a direct order. One that made every muscle in his body lock up in pure, unfiltered fear. A split second ago, he had been the one in control. Now? Now, he was just a terrified idiot standing way too close to an elite British soldier. A woman in the crowd actually yelped. A teenage boy, still filming, whispered under his breath, "Dude, he's done." Someone else muttered, "You don't mess with the king's guard." And Jake? He was still standing there, frozen in place, his brain desperately trying to process how things had gone so wrong so quickly. His friends, Tyler and Nick, were no longer cheering him on. Instead, they were staring in stunned silence, their phones still recording, their faces pale. They had wanted a funny video, but now even they knew. This wasn't funny anymore. Adrenaline flooded Jake's system, snapping him out of his fear-induced paralysis. His legs reacted before his brain could. He stumbled backward, fast, too fast. His foot caught on the uneven pavement, and suddenly his entire body lurched sideways. Crash! Jake hit the ground hard, his back slamming against the pavement, arms flailing as he desperately tried to regain control. The crowd lost it. Laughter erupted like an explosion. Phones zoomed in. People pointed, some clapping their hands in pure second-hand embarrassment. And as Jake lay there, staring up at the cloudy London sky, two things became abundantly clear. One, he had failed, spectacularly. Two, the Royal Guard hadn't even blinked. The soldier, now back in his impeccable posture, had already reset. Like Jake had never existed. Like the entire incident had been so beneath him that it wasn't even worth acknowledging. And somehow, that was the worst part. Not the fall, not the laughter, not the phones recording his humiliation. It was the fact that the Royal Guard had dismissed him completely. Because at the end of the day, Jake wasn't a challenge. He was just another idiot who had tried to mess with history and lost. Jake scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. The laughter was getting louder. The murmurs were turning into memes in real time. And then, he spotted a new problem. A Metropolitan Police officer was walking toward him. Expression, completely unreadable. Hand, already resting on his radio. And just like that, Jake realized that this wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get so much worse. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to his feet, legs still wobbly from the fall. The crowd was still laughing, but now there was a shift in tone. It wasn't just amusement anymore. There was an undeniable undercurrent of, "Oh, he's screwed." Because striding toward him, expression unreadable, pace steady, was a Metropolitan Police officer. And Jake knew, with bone-chilling certainty, that things were about to go from bad to catastrophic. The officer was built like a man who had seen it all. Tall, broad, and radiating the kind of calm authority that meant there was no talking your way out of this. His vest crinkled slightly as he adjusted his radio, giving Jake a slow, appraising look as he came to a stop just a few feet away. For a second, Jake thought about bolting. But where would he go? Through the crowds of tourists still filming his humiliation? Straight into Buckingham Palace, where he'd have even bigger problems? No. He was trapped. The officer let the silence hang for a moment, letting Jake sweat. Then, in a calm but dangerously firm voice, he said, "Care to explain what exactly you were doing?" Jake's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His brain, still buzzing from adrenaline and panic, was desperately scrambling for an excuse. He could say, "It was a joke." Terrible idea. "I tripped." Even worse idea. "My friends dared me." Throwing his boys under the bus? Maybe. But before he could get a single word out, his so-called friends betrayed him. Tyler and Nick had been trying to hold in their laughter. They failed spectacularly. Nick, still recording, choked out. Mate tried to steal the hat. Got humbled instantly. Tyler, wiping tears from his eyes, added, "Dude really thought he could outmaneuver a soldier. Look at him." The officer raised an eyebrow. Is that true? Jake swallowed hard. He could already see his life flashing before his eyes. This was not a funny vacation story anymore. This was a potential arrest record. This was a YouTube fail compilation in the making. This was an international humiliation. As the officer waited for an answer, Jake made the terrible mistake of glancing back at the Royal Guard, still standing, still unmoved, still unbothered. Like none of this was even worth his attention. Jake had been embarrassed before. But this was next level. Because he hadn't just lost the prank, he had lost his entire dignity. The officer finally let out a long sigh, rubbing his temple like a man dealing with one too many drunk tourists this week. "Do we have a problem here?" he asked, voice neutral but carrying a weight of authority that made Jake's stomach twist. Jake did the only thing he could do. He shook his head, fast. No, sir. No problem. I slipped?" The crowd burst into laughter again. Even the officer let out a small, unimpressed chuckle. "Yeah, sure you did." He glanced at the phone still recording, sighed, and crossed his arms. "Here's the deal," he said. "You've just attempted to interfere with an active duty soldier during official ceremonial duties." Jake felt the color drain from his face. Tyler muttered under his breath, "Bro, you're done." The officer let that sink in for a moment, then continued. "I could charge you right now. I could escort you off the premises." Jake's soul nearly left his body. "But," the officer added, voice dropping to a warning tone, "I think you've already embarrassed yourself enough." The crowd oofed. Jake winced. And then, finally, the officer delivered the final blow. "Now get out of here before I change my mind." Jake did not argue. He did not make eye contact. He turned around and walked, fast. His friends were howling behind him. Tourists were pointing, whispering, still recording. Someone even clapped sarcastically as he passed. And the Royal Guard? Still motionless. Still as unshaken as he had been before Jake's terrible life choices. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because as Jake hurried down the street, face burning, trying to pretend none of this had ever happened, the internet was already getting to work. Jake's entire body burned with humiliation as he power walked away from Buckingham Palace, his so-called friends dying of laughter behind him. Tyler was still recording, barely able to hold his phone steady. Nick, between wheezes of laughter, managed to choke out, "Dude, you just got humbled by a guy who didn't even blink." Jake wanted to disappear. Maybe move to another country. Maybe fake his own death. Because he already knew. His failure wasn't just a moment in time. It was now a permanent part of the internet. Before they even got back to the hotel, Jake's phone started buzzing. He pulled it out with shaking hands. And there it was. The first TikTok notification. Nick had already uploaded the video. The title? "Dude tries to steal a Royal Guard's hat. Gets destroyed." Jake gulped. He opened the app, praying that nobody had seen it yet. But no, it was already at 10,000 views, and climbing, fast. As Jake scrolled, the comments were brutal. Bro really thought he could outmaneuver the British military? Jake let out a strangled groan. Nick, looking over his shoulder, grinned. "Oh yeah, this is gonna go viral." The next blow came fast. By the time they reached the hotel, the video had jumped platforms. Twitter, X, was now in on the action. And the memes? They were relentless. One user posted a freeze frame of Jake's panicked face as the guard moved, with the caption, "The exact moment he knew he effed up." Another had a side-by-side comparison of the guard standing firm while Jake stumbled away, with the text, "Unshaken, unmoved, unbothered, undefeated." And then came the GIF edits. One slowed down the moment of Jake reaching for the hat, followed by the guard's powerful step forward, overlaid with dramatic music. Another put the audio of WWE commentators screaming, "Oh my God!" over the footage. And then, the news outlets got involved. Within hours, sites like LAD Bible, BuzzFeed, and the Daily Mail were posting articles. The headlines were merciless. Tourist tries to prank royal guard, immediately regrets it. Jake felt sick. He had gone from tourist to international clown in less than 24 hours. And the worst part? There was no undoing it. Jake sat on the hotel bed, staring at his phone like it was a ticking time bomb. Then, a new notification. A text from his mom. "Jake, explain this video I just saw of you on Facebook. Right now." Jake let out a strangled whimper. Nick burst out laughing. Tyler collapsed onto the couch. "Oh, dude, you are never living this down." Jake flopped back onto the bed, covering his face. This was it. This was his legacy now. Not as a traveler, not as an adventurer, but as the idiot who tried to steal a royal guard's hat and got absolutely wrecked. And somewhere, standing as still as ever, rifle in hand, completely unshaken by the chaos he had caused, the royal guard remained undefeated. Jake had officially hit the point of no return. His attempted prank had not only backfired spectacularly, but had now been seen by millions across the world. Every hour, the views skyrocketed. Every second, new comments piled on. And now Jake was living in his own personal nightmare. Because while the royal guard had already moved on, the internet had not, and it never would. The next morning, Jake's head pounded, not from alcohol, not from exhaustion, but from pure soul-crushing embarrassment. His phone buzzed relentlessly. He reached for it with a groan, hoping somehow, overnight, the world had forgotten. Nope. The first thing he saw? A news notification. American tourists failed Buckingham Palace, prank goes viral. This is why you don't mess with the King's Guard. Jake's stomach dropped. It wasn't just memes anymore. It was headlines. Actual news outlets were covering it now. LAD Bible, BBC News, BuzzFeed, the Daily Mail, all running with the story. And the worst part? They all used the same freeze frame of his face, right at the moment of pure terror when the guard moved. The exact second he realized he had screwed up. Jake wanted to throw his phone across the room. Instead, he kept scrolling, and somehow it kept getting worse. Twitter, X, was still on fire. The original video, now at over 3 million views, and the reactions, ruthless. The guard didn't just humble him, he erased him. The edits were endless. One video had slow-motion replays, dramatic sound effects, and subtitles like "The Stand Back Heard Around the World." Another had been edited with epic battle music, making it seem like Jake had just challenged a centuries-old warrior and lost. And the worst one? A TikTok remix featuring Thanos' voice saying, "You should have gone for the head." Jake groaned into his pillow. There was no escaping this. And then, the ultimate betrayal. A new text notification from his mom. "Jake, your grandmother just saw this video on Facebook. Call me. Now." Jake felt his soul leave his body. His grandma had seen it. The woman who still thought he was a responsible adult. The same woman who sent him Bible quotes every morning. Jake let out a long, broken sigh. His entire family was about to see this. There was no fixing it. There was no hiding from it. Because he wasn't just a random tourist anymore. He was that guy. The idiot who thought he could mess with a royal guard, and lost. Across London, standing as still as ever, rifle in hand, the royal guard remained undefeated. To him, this wasn't even a story worth remembering. It was just another day on duty. But to Jake, this was a defining moment, one that would haunt him forever. Because while the guard never broke, Jake did. And now, the whole world had proof.